My eerste gas vanaand is professor Adama Bied, hy is die fisiekanselier van die Universiteit van die Witwatersrand, oftewel WITS. Daar was verlede jaar erge geweld wat daar voorgekom het, maar miskien gaan ons nou hoor dit was dalk nie so erg nie. Hallo Adam.
Hi.
How is it going at WITS at the moment? It's the 23rd of January and you're in your registration process. Is the atmosphere different from last year?
It's very quiet.
Really?
We've had a very good 2 weeks. We've had exams, a second sitting of exams, where about 7% of our students wrote, about 93% wrote last year.
Wow.
And effectively, we were simultaneously registering first-year students.
Sure.
We've completed first year. Students above 93%. We still, a couple of stragglers are being registered. Returning students will be registering this week. So until, touch wood, until today, we've had a good 2.5 weeks. It's been quiet, it's been calm. I've spoken to students, they're looking forward to the year. A lot of them are very enthusiastic. There's some concerns about people not having fees or not having enough money to pay for the fees. And so we've made some concessions, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But effectively, it's been a good 2.5 weeks. I wish the rest of the year were like this.
So the focus is now on students that don't have money, whereas maybe the Fees Must Fall movement of 2016 was quite ideological in some instances, or with hidden agendas.
Well, I think that there were 2 or 3 things. I think that, firstly, there's a large number of students who do believe in free education. And let's be honest, there are places in the world where you can get free education. You just pay through it from the tax system rather than people fees. Germany is an example. Mexico is another. Argentina is another, with very, very different effects, Scandinavian countries. Many of those countries are very rich. Germany is much larger economy than ours. And you're not going to get free education with the economy growing at 0.5%.
Yeah.
That's a serious problem. So there's, for many students, I think, bringing down the cost of education or free education is something that is important. But I think that there are other factions within it. I think that there's a small group, a small faction that has political agendas. They, some of them want to get rid of the president, or they want to overthrow the state, or they want to win over land. And they're using the university as an instrument to win another political battle. And I think that that is problematic. I've said publicly today, I find it absolutely outrageous that politicians would play with public universities like this. They should be held accountable. But then there's others also that are worth. There's a group and a faction within the student movement that said, if there is no free education, there shall be no education at all.
Yeah,
And
how unproductive is that?
that's right. So I think there are different factions. Last count I did was 8 factions within the student movement.
Yes.
And
they're all so
that
different
makes
things.
it very, very difficult to manage.
Yeah. Let's go back to free education in Germany. Also, that is just not, it's not just free education. There are some things that you have to take in regard, like accommodation, etc.
So what Germany has is free tuition. And you pay for accommodation, and you pay for, or most people stay at home, and then you pay for your own subsistence. They do have a loan scheme. But of the loan scheme, about 600,000 students on the loan scheme. Half loan, half grant. And effectively, that's about 25% of the system. Get a loan for accommodation and this thing. So it really is a very, very peculiar system. Mexico is another example. Free tuition, but no accommodation. And then you have to ask the questions, do those universities, at least in Mexico, have the kind of sporting systems we have, the cultural systems that we have, all of those kinds of things. I really worry. You raised in your introduction the issue of private universities. Are they the answer? I worry that if you destroy public universities, then people will either go overseas or they'll look at private universities. But don't be under any illusions. It's very rare in the world that you can create a private research-intensive university. The only place that has a private research-intensive university is the United States. And that's because Harvard is not private. It's a well-endowed university over 100 years. Stanford is not this thing. It's an endowed university. And so don't assume that private universities, they'll be teaching universities.
Yes.
They'll do undergraduate, but they're not going to provide the masters and PhDs and the cutting edge research, the vaccine production around HIV AIDS and all of the things that you're going to get in institutions. Stellenbosch did a world-breaking penis transplant last year.
Yes, I remember.
You know, UCT's got cutting-edge stuff in the health sciences. We've done some fantastic work around vaccine production. All of that is not going to happen in private universities, partly because that's only possible in funded institutions.
But yet you also approached the private sector last year.
I think that the private sector is important to finding a solution.
Yes.
I think that we're going to need a public-private partnership. I'm not keen on private universities. I don't mind some, but I'm not keen on replacing all our public universities with private ones. But I do think that the private sector must come to the party. I think that if those public universities collapse, the private sector is in salsa. Where are you going to get your professionals? You know, WITS produces 50% of the actuarial graduates in this country. We produce 50% of postgraduate medical scientists in this country. Where are all those people going to come from if WITS were to collapse? Where's the kind of space sciences that Stellenbosch and UCT are working on? Where's that going to come from if those institutions collapse? Same thing, there's some fantastic universities. I think if you look at UJ, if you look at Northwest, there's some UWC, they produce some fantastic stuff. You know, UWC is doing fuel technologies. And we need to think about that kind of stuff. So I do worry. I think the private sector needs to come in. I think they need to come in assisting with the financing of effectively chairs, providing appropriate scholarships. To be fair, I've seen a number of the private sector companies come to the party in the last couple of months.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful for much of the monies that they've made available to many of the universities.
And is the government coming to the party? Tell me about the concession.
So firstly, the government has come to the party at some levels. I think we've got a problem at the government level. I think we've got a divided state. I think, and that's not been helpful. I think they've blundered how they've done it. So last year, in 2015, we had a protest. They set up a commission. It took 7 months to set up the commission. The commission was originally meant to report in June this past year. Now it will report next year. So the fact that we had 2016 problems, because that commission hadn't reported on time.
Yeah.
So I do think the state could be more efficient. On the other hand, to be fair, the ministry has engaged. There have been a series of consultations with students. They engage the vice chancellors. They've listened to much of what we've said, and there has been some movement in this regard. They've put 8%. They've recommended an 8% increase, which most universities implemented. But what they also did is they funded the increase for anybody with a family income of less than 600,000. That's a generous contribution. They've also suggested that to us recently that we should register all NSFAS students, even those with historic debt, and they'll underwrite that. So that's where they did come to the party. I did ask, and many of my colleagues asked the state to guarantee, while we're waiting, can you guarantee the historic debt of missing middle students?
Yes.
And then they said they didn't have the resources.
All right.
And in that context is when WITS made this concession. And we made 2 concessions. We made, if you have a debt of less than 10,000, we roll that debt into your 2017 fees. So if you owe 60,000 this year, you'll owe 70,000 and we'll register you. For those with above 10,000, then what we do is we give you, if you pay 50% and enter into a payment plan, we'll register you for the year. I think that goes far enough.
Yeah.
It tackles more than 60, 70% of the students. And the idea is to try and go as far as we can to assist post students. Remember, we are governed by the Higher Education Act, which says very clearly that my responsibility as Vice Chancellor is to make sure I keep the institution financially sustainable. The Credit Act says you cannot provide debt to people who can't pay. So effectively, I've got to navigate that and ensure that while I'm making as many concessions as I can, I'm still keeping the institution in a financially sustainable path. And that's a tricky thing to do, if you like.
Lastly, since there are concessions being made, etc., maybe would that be a reason to think there would be no protests this year, or is it just the hidden agenda of the protesters that we still have to be on the lookout for?
Look, I hope we don't. I really hope we don't. I don't think South African universities can go through another year of political instability. You're going to destroy these institutions. We're going to start losing academic staff, and everybody else will lose. You know, rich people will send their kids overseas. Yeah. It's the poor students, middle class people that would suffer, and so I worry about that. Do I think it's enough? I think we've tried. I don't think I can do more. I think we are engaging students. There's been no guarantees. They've said they're still keen on free education. They're keen on lowering the cost of education. I've said to the students, by the way, I'll march with you for those kind of goals on 2 conditions: no violence and no permanent shutdown. And I stand by that.
Great. Thanks, Adam. Good luck. We hope to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Daar's nou so baie waar ons nog moes gesels, maar jy kan gerus professor Habib se artikel op Daily Maverick gaan soek. Hy het 'n baie goeie terugblik oor 2016 daar neergeskryf. Dis nou eers tyd vir advertensies. Daarna gesels ons oor Afrikaans as onderrigtaal by universiteite en of private hoër onderwys dalk die antwoord is. Professor Habib sê nie heeltemal so nie. Moenie weggaan nie.